I'm gonna. Good afternoon. Don't completely shut the doors. Let the folks in. All right. Has it been a good day? Another good day for everybody? Great. And Danielle is still my friend. And Tim still has all the drink tickets if anybody needs a drink ticket. Tim has them. Right, Tim? He isn't even listening to me. Hey, Tim, you got the drink tickets? All right, we're going to get ready and get started. Our last session, our last time together for 2023. All right. So when we started, I told you about some contests, right? Well, we have some winners. All right. So for our first social media contest, the winners are Onondaga Earth Corps, and Power Corps. And Earth Corps. All right. So Onondaga, Earth Corps, and Power Corps were all winners of $50 Visa gift cards. Go ahead. It's all right to celebrate them. It's okay. Our next social media contest, the winners are Green City Force. As their director turns and looks at her staff and says, "What did we do?" No. And the next winner is Kupu. And for those of you in TV land, we're so sorry. We had a major technology explosion this afternoon, but we're sorry. We're back live, I hope. For the person that was watching virtually, there was also a contest for virtual. That winner, Sherry Calloway in Louisiana. Sherry. And the in-person winner is from Onondaga, Kate Abel. And each one of you will receive a $100 Visa e-card. So all of those will be sent to you electronically. Let's have another round of applause for our social media winners. And for one last time, we have, what'd they do with it? There it is. An Amazfit watch. Bruce? No, come on, Bruce. All right, so we may let you keep your job regardless. What's this for? A watch. All right, here we go. The number is 668977. Yay! Uh-huh. 977. Bruce, you've gotten real good at this. I next year. Okay. All right, so we've done our door prizes, we've done our social media prizes, we've done everything else I think that's on the script. If not, our communications team will flag me and let me know. But I think it's time to introduce the fifth and final core member of the year. And one of the things I want to say here is a shout out to Katie Gorman. I hope you're watching, and Delaware North, who is the sponsor for making sure all of our core members get to travel to Washington, D.C. So thanks very much to Delaware North. So our final core member of the year is Charity Dixon of Rockland County Conservation and Service Corps. Go ahead, you clap for her. Yeah. Described as a driven, scientifically curious, and results oriented, it's no surprise that Charity has faced numerous professional, personal, and environmental accomplishments while serving with Rockland County Conservation and Service Corps. Eager to help the neighborhood where she grew up, she conducted important community field work within the village of Haverstraw, while also serving as a near peer mentor with the next generation of River educators program through Columbia University. One of her supervisors stated that Charity really helped to define the role of building connections between the local community and their environment. Her passion for introducing her community to the Hudson was unstoppable. Through Next Generation, Charity maintained close connections with 19 high school students while they participated in the 8-week program. Additionally, through a co-facilitating Science Saturday on the Piedmont Pier, she had educated more than 1,400 people with the Hudson River activities. What makes Charity so effective in her work in environmental education and outreach is her ability to render scientific concepts into engaging and fun community events. Charity is currently studying journalism at the New School. And just to give you a little sidebar, bet you didn't know, she is a triplet. She has two brothers, right? Two boys? Okay. All right. And Charity, her parents gave her the right name at the beginning because that's exactly what she does. She also has her mother, Anna, who is with her today. Charity. So please welcome our core member of the year, Charity Dixon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for such a warm welcome throughout this whole entire conference. I'm so overwhelmed with love and support. My heart is going to jump out of my chest and break dance on the floor right now. Good afternoon. My name is Charity Dixon, and I am your 2023 Core Member of the Year, representing New York, the Village of Haverstraw, and the Rockland Conservation and Service Corps. I'm so honored to be amongst all of you this year at the Core Network's National Conference here in DC. For our speeches this year, they asked us to talk about leadership, and I sat down and I thought about my first memory of being a leader. It was back in 3rd grade. I and a group of girls who were my best friends at the time decided to sign up for the school talent show. Our act was to dance to the song "What Makes You Beautiful" by One Direction. We practiced every single day during recess. Naturally, I noticed that I was fulfilling the role as leader and choreographer. My best friends entrusted me with the responsibility of creating the best performance ever done to this specific pop song in hopes of the members of this popular boy band noticing us. Our practice session at recess attracted more and more of our classmates. More and more asking, "Can I be in the group?" I felt bad saying no. In fact, I didn't want to. I wanted everyone who wanted to join to feel included, to learn the steps and dance with us at recess during our practices. And at one point, our little group of 5 turned into an ensemble of 20. And we all knew that not all 20 of us would be dancing up on stage that night. But it felt right calling over everyone I knew to join our little group and dance for a while. With the sun beaming down on the blacktop, I vividly remember being in front of all my peers yelling, "Okay, 5, 6, 7, 8." Now, this may seem like a silly childhood memory, but it was my first time feeling like a leader. It didn't matter who came over and asked to join the group. A leader needs collective. And looking back on that memory has taught me that a leader is nothing without community. In my K through 12 days, I found the most sense of leadership and community in an organization I joined called Aspira. It was about 2 months into my freshman year of high school, dismissal time. The double doors awaited me as I rushed to hop into my seat on the bus and get home. All of a sudden, I was pulled into the school cafeteria by one of my older cousins, a senior at the time, and he looked at me and he said, "You're joining this club." And so I did, and I joined the club, but what seemed like a little school club that I and many assume was just about being Latinx turned out to teach me the most valuable lessons about community, empowerment, identity, and leadership. One of those lessons is called the AAA process. Now, quickly for context, Aspira was founded in 1961 by Doctora Antonia Pantoja, and the mission of Aspira, which means to aspire in Spanish, was to provide Latinx youth with a foundation and support system to succeed. And although it wasn't Doctora Antonia Pantoja that taught me the AAA process herself, it was one of my dearest mentors, Sydney Valerio, that taught me such a valuable three-step process that I've taken with me and used in almost all of my leadership endeavors. The AAA process involves three concepts: awareness, analysis, and action. The awareness is asking, what do I know? The analysis, what do I need to know? And the action, making it happen. Action is the process of putting the knowledge and skills one has acquired to use for the benefit of oneself, one's family, and one's community. Through involvement in community service projects developed by programs like the Corps, one finds themselves with what feels like the right steps to tackle any issue or project. And this past summer, as I was participating in the Corps, on my day at my site, which was with Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory's Next Generation of Hudson River Educators program, we had some free time with the students, and I took the opportunity to talk to them about this process. Their reaction will always stick with me because it was filled with wide eyes, note-taking, and positive feedback. I remember one of them telling me how much of a valuable lesson it was to them. Many of them came to me and said that they will apply this to the next time they're confronted with an issue or a project they want to make possible. What I want them to know is that they impacted me not only as a leader, not only as a mentor, but as a young woman just trying to make her way in the world. I went into the Corps with no environmental studies background. I was an aspiring writer and journalist and still am. But I knew that I wanted to spend my summer giving back, creating meaningful connections and becoming empowered and learning how to empower those around me. Although it seems unrelated, the Corps strengthened my abilities as a writer and as a journalist. I was able to learn valuable skills such as public speaking, mapping out projects, and most of all, tuning into the needs of other people and to the land that I was serving. The Corps helped project my journalism career in such amazing ways. I became more of a microscopic journalist, microscopic writer, microscopic reporter. I even got to get featured in the New York Department of Environmental Conservation's Conservationist magazine and wrote a feature article for them this past summer. There was always a huge part in me that valued giving back and serving my community, and the Corps helped me get back in touch with that and more. I was able to partake in service projects I never dreamed of doing. I got to test my abilities as a leader, as a mentor, and as a peer. What I appreciated about the Corps is that it challenged me. I was put in situations that made me learn valuable social and leadership skills. Overcoming the physical, mental, and social obstacles, learning those valuable lessons helped form myself into the empowered young woman I always dreamed of becoming. The 2 years I spent with the Corps helped to overcome my fears and uplift my strengths. With the support I got from my time in the Corps, I was able to embrace the qualities I always felt that were inside of me. I learned to be confident and to be a leader for the members of my community because I believe that there is a leader inside of all of us. One issue that I feel as though my generation can address through programs like the Corps is that of environmental justice and climate change. Being part of Rockland Conservation and Service Corps, I learned so much about environmental issues that were happening around me on the local level. We traveled to different towns all over Rockland County and witnessed some effects of climate change and environmental injustice. As we entered into these communities, the residents found it influential and empowering to see youth like me remediating these problems. And it was through witnessing our service that community members and residents started to form a connection and become aware of their natural environment. One example in particular, my site placement for the time I spent with the Corps, which was with Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. I was mentoring the next generation of Hudson River educators, and the program was based in a riverfront town of Haverstraw, which has been my hometown all my life. Our site placement was at Emmeline Park, which was right in my backyard. I literally walked to work every day. It was the best. The town consists of a dense population of Dominican people, I being one of them. I've lived in this town all of my life and have witnessed people's hesitations when going near or interacting with the Hudson River. Throughout the weeks of the program, residents would come up to us curious to know what we were doing. Slowly, we attracted more residents from the village of Haverstraw, and we saw more and more families gathered near the river. BIPOC and marginalized communities deserve to understand their natural resources. And it is through that I believe we can address an issue, which is humans' misconnection with the natural world. We protect what we understand. And as the residents of the village of Haverstraw learn to understand the river for its many important functions, the people now feel empowered to protect it. There is a leader in every individual, in me, in the Dominican people in my hometown, and in everyone in this room today. I'd like to wrap up by thanking a few people who have helped me on my journey and who have brought me here to this point. Kathy Galleon, who is not only my mentor, but my friend. Kim Burgos and everyone at the Rockland County Youth Bureau who work on making sure that programs like the Corps stay in place. To my mother, who is the strongest woman I know and the strongest woman you'll ever know, who is in the audience right now. Without you, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. To both of my parents and to my brothers watching at home. And last but certainly not least, everyone at the Corps Network, as well as everyone whose hands and hearts helped put this conference together this week. I am honored and eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Charity, for that inspiring story. Let's give her one more round of applause. Okay. All right. Now we are going to head into our final plenary of the conference. And last but certainly not least, we're going to hear from Karen Pittman. Karen has made a career of starting organizations and initiatives to promote youth development. A sociologist, Karen started her career at the Urban Institute, conducting studies on social services for children and families. She later moved to the Children's Defense Fund, launching its first adolescent pregnancy prevention initiatives and helping create its adolescent policy agenda. In 1990, she became vice president at the Academy for Educational Development, where she founded and directed the Center for Youth Development and Policy Research, and its spinoff, the National Training Institute for Community Youth Work. In 1995, Karen joined the Clinton administration as director of the President's Crime Prevention Council. From there, she moved to the executive team of the International Youth Foundation, IYF, charged with helping the organization strengthen its program content and develop an evaluation strategy. In 1998, Kieran and Rick Little, head of the foundation, took a leave of absence to work with retired General Colin Powell to create America's Promise. Upon her return, she and Marita Irby launched the Forum for Youth Investment. Kieran has written 3 books and dozens of articles on youth issues and was a regular columnist in the youth development newspaper, Youth Today. She's been honored with numerous awards, including the American Youth Policy Forum Decade of Service Award for sustained visionary leadership in advancing youth policy, the nonprofit Times Power and Influence Top 50. She was named one of the 25 most influential leaders in after-school programming by the National After School Association. And she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from Partners for Livable Cities. And I am extremely proud and pleased to announce that this past Monday, she joined the Core Network's Board of Directors. So she is renowned in the world of youth development, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her work and how it applies to the work that you do. So please join us.
Thank you. So for those of you who were wondering whether I can keep a job or not, that many jobs means I'm old. So it's really a pleasure to be here. And it's really an honor to join the board. Such an exciting organization and so much potential. I'm going to take a little bit of time, not much, to tell you what your potential is around this idea of positive youth development. Although if you were listening carefully to Charity, you heard the potential. You heard all the ways that young people grow and develop when given the opportunity. But I'm going to give you a little bit of the research behind it so we can be more intentional about it. So at the Forum for Youth Investment, when we started it 20 plus years ago, we had an opportunity to work with the Ford Foundation for about 5 years to really develop this concept of community youth development with people from around the world. We had 7 different countries from South America, Europe, and Africa come with us, and we took tours to really understand what the relationship was between young people and their community. And what we ended up doing after all that work, there's a whole box of resources that you can get to at some point, but what we ended up doing to summarize this was developing this idea of a double arrow, a dynamic double arrow, that too often we say young people have to be supported by their community, and then they magically get to an age where then they have to turn around and contribute to their community. We think this is a very linear process. What you heard from Charity is that's not the case. Anytime we have young people leading, whether it's in 3rd grade, 5th grade, or 8th grade, they are contributing to their community simultaneously with young people getting supports from their community. So this idea that young people and adults can work together to create the necessary conditions for the successful development of themselves, their peers, their families, and their communities is really what positive youth development is all about. It's really what this idea of really getting hard to think about community youth development is all about. We brought this idea to the National Research Council, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences. And it took us a couple years, we started in the 1990s, to get them convinced that there was enough evidence that they could set up a committee to look at this. It's a big deal when you get the National Research Council to put together an official research committee to review the research and decide that something exists from a research perspective. So in 2002, after 2 years of doing research review, they put out a book called Community Programs to Promote Youth Development. And in that book, they officially announced the value of this approach of positive youth development. That, and I'll just read it to you. It's emerged over time as a common shorthand philosophy. We made up the common shorthand that problem-free is not fully prepared, that our goals for young people cannot just be to keep them out of trouble, but our goals have to be full of preparation. That the remediation and prevention services alone are not enough, and schools and communities have to be supported and complemented by broader options. So this idea really became official in the federal government. To just bring this to light, and you can look at this list and see some of the things that Charity was just talking about in terms of the skills and competencies she developed. It was really important that they review the research thoroughly and tell us what it is, what are the assets that young people need to have to be successful. And at this point, when we were talking about not just staying out of trouble, we were convincing people who were doing prevention and remediation, they really should be in the asset building business. they really looked at, there's a broad list of intellectual development, social development, physical development, psychological and emotional development. And what they came up with as a summary was, it doesn't matter which assets young people have, it just matters how many. The more, the better. But this country's overemphasis on academic success, while critical, blurs and diminishes the importance of having a broad set of assets that you can bring into your community and use to strengthen yourself. So that was an important finding. The other thing that they did was to say, well, what are the characteristics of the settings that can support youth development? This is a very logical list, things that you would expect. But to have them say, this is what optimal development settings look like, whether they're schools, their community organizations, their juvenile justice programs, their prevention programs, this is what we need to have them doing. And just an example of how they then further define that, they just give us a list. They gave us descriptors of each one. This is the descriptor for support for efficacy and mattering. And you'll see that they really went to the point of saying, this is what it looks like when it's bad. This is what it looks like when it's good, but when young people are not getting it, when they're not being challenged, when they're being over-controlled, when they're being disempowered, that's doing them harm. So it was really, really important to get these parameters laid out by the National Research Council. But that wasn't enough. We had to then put it into action. So there are two definitive studies that came out that same time period that really showed us and gave us data on what happens when you use this approach in communities. And I'll take you through a couple of them really quickly. The first one was the Search Institute. How many people have heard of the Search Institute and the 40 assets? A couple folks in the room. Search has been around for a long time. And Peter Benson, who been there has now deceased, but was there forever leading this work of the 40 assets, really decided to take this idea to heart that if young people really do need to have a range of assets, communities need to have a way of knowing what these assets are, and they need to have a way of knowing whether their young people have them. Not in specific programs, but at the community level, can we look at what our assets are? So he developed a list of 40 assets. They came into these 8 categories. And again, he reaffirmed this idea that the number of assets is more important than which ones. How many you have, how balanced your assets are is much more important than excelling in one thing. They also then showed that assets are strong predictors of both thriving and risky behaviors, both. So when you look at thriving, it's a very clear straight line. The more assets you have, the more likely it is that you're thriving. You're successful in school, you're helping others, you're valuing diversity, you have good mental health, you're exhibiting leadership, you're doing all the things that we think of when we think of young people thriving. And that comes directly along with having more assets. But the opposite is also true. The fewer assets you have, the more likely you are to be engaged in risky behaviors. Straight line data showing the number of assets matter. And putting communities on call to say, this is not hard. This list of assets, anybody can help young people to build these assets. It's not just about schools doing it. It's not just about professionals doing it. This is a community challenge. They also showed, which is important, that the racial and ethnic differences between assets were not as large as we imagined. So you can see the numbers up there, a 2-point difference between whites, blacks, Latinos, Asians. You think from the news and from the stories that young people of color have no assets or very few assets. That's actually not the case. So we really are going to have to ask the question, if we don't have huge differences in assets, why do we see such big differences in outcomes? That's a question for us to ask, and we can talk about it. But they also showed that the same impact of assets on behaviors, and they go both ways, works the same for all racial and ethnic groups. Again, it's important information if we're going to talk about equity to just challenge assumptions about what's going on. Asset for asset, the more assets anybody of any race or ethnicity has, the more likely they are to be able to avoid risky behaviors, and the more likely they are to be able to thrive. It's a clear straight line difference, and you see that that goes along for everybody. Finally, they showed families are the strongest source of assets. But assets come from everywhere, from school, and personally, from community, from your social peers. Assets are found everywhere, but families are the most important source. And then this is the important one to note. You'd think assets would go up as you get older, but they don't. From 6th grade to 12th grade, which is what this community survey does, you see a steady decline in assets from almost 24 down to 19. Why are young people's assets declining? It's because we're letting go of them too soon. It's because when we think of little kids, we think of really building those supports, making those external assets important. As they get older, we say, yeah, they can take care of it themselves. They can't. They need our intentional support. And especially as we're thinking about what you all are doing with the population of sort of 18 to 24, 18 to 26-year-olds, that line, if they kept going, would probably keep going down. Because as older young people get, the more we assume they can do it on their own, and the more we pull out our important supports for them. So let's look a little bit at the data for young adults. The other study that I had up on the screen, Gambone and Connell, looked at assets for young people between the ages of 15 and 25. And they wrote a book called Finding Out What Matters for Youth. And they really set out to find out what matters. So the first thing that they did was to define, they looked at all those asset data, that list of 40, 50 assets, and they boiled them down into 3 categories that young people need to have by the time they're young adults. They need a way to be productive, they need a way to be healthy, they need a way to be connected. And they looked at existing data to define those. What they came up with was, if you were doing well as a young adult in your mid-20s, you were attending college or working steadily, you had good health, healthy habits, healthy relationships, and or you were volunteering or being politically active or being active in a religious institution, you were connected some broader way. And you didn't have to be doing all 3, you just had to be doing well in 2 of those and okay in the 3rd. That doesn't seem like a big goal, that by the mid-20s, young people can be productive, healthy, and connected. But only 4 out of 10 young people in their survey, when they put all this data together, met that goal. Only 4 out of 10 young people met that goal. And on the other side, 2 out of 10 young people were really in trouble. They were doing poorly. They were doing well in any areas, and they were struggling. And you can see that up there. And struggling really meant struggling. Having a high school diploma or less, being unemployed, being on welfare, risky behaviors, risky habits, and committing illegal activity. So if young people were not doing well, they really weren't doing well. They really were struggling. So 2 out of 10 young people were struggling, 4 out of 10 were doing well, 4 out of 10 were in the middle. That's pretty sobering. But what they found was what galvanized communities when we brought this data to them. They found that if every adolescent gets the supports that they need in their high school years, and those supports really are the same ones: supportive relationships, challenging experiences, opportunities to engage and contribute. If they got those supports in their high school years, that we could move the number of young adults doing well from 4 in 10 to 7 in 10. We could almost double the number of young people who are doing well by the definition of doing well, just by providing supports in high school. So with that data, we then went forward to say, all right, the federal government needs to really own this. We've got the research, we've got the data. Now it's time to really understand how we make it official. So the federal government set up something called the Interagency Working Group for Youth Development, Youth Programs, and they came up with this definition. First, at the highest level, positive experiences plus positive relationships plus positive environments equals positive development. I can't think of any better definition, better explanation of what that looks like than the core. That's what you all do. Positive experiences, positive relationships, positive environments. So you're getting to positive youth development. They have a definition, which I won't read to you, but this definition is officially done. It was brokered together by 23 different federal agencies, and it's actively in use right now on youth.gov. They also put the research behind it. That PYD, repeating the research from the National Research Council, as working on full potential rather than overwhelmed by problems that need to be solved. It promotes the idea that adults can make significant and positive differences in young people's lives. And it's most valuable for young people who are struggling. To bring this approach to young people who are struggling has an exponentially beneficial effect. So let me give you one more thing to show how important it is for us to think about the fact that adolescents and young adults are still developing, they still need our help, they still need intentional supports, but that we can be incredibly optimistic about what this looks like. Very often we hear the phrase, if you don't get to them by 3rd grade, it's too late, right? Don't invest in teens. If they're off track, you can't get them back on track. There's nothing further than the truth. This was a huge project done by the Brookings Institution and the Urban Institute and Child Trends in 2016 that's called a Social Genome Project. They cobbled together thousands of individual data files to track people from birth through 30 years old. an incredible effort that they did. And this is what they found. That being off track is not the norm, that it's the exception, that everybody, when you look at it in the aggregate, moves from being on track to being off track to being on track. You look across the developmental periods, the minority of people stay on track all 5 periods. Most of us get off track. The question is, how do we get back on track? This data was so interesting that you see in general, about 6 out of 10 people are on track in every developmental period from when your family forms up until young adults. And their definition of doing well was called middle class by middle age. They wanted people to be 300% above the poverty level by age 30. That was their goal, to get you well into the middle class by the time you were 30. And with that, they worked backwards to see what the predictors were. And they were the same things. You had to be productive, and you had to be healthy, and you had to not be in trouble. Same kind of goals. But the interesting thing are these little arrows that go back and forth between them. Because for every young person, let's look at the disadvantaged kids, 45% of early childhood kids are disadvantaged. They move, they move from 45% disadvantaged. 6 out of 10 of them move into being on track because of interventions we have in early childhood. You're born off track, you don't stay off track. For early childhood, 34% are off track, 45% of them move on track. You see the arrows going both directions. The thing that's significant is that the chances of making it into the middle class by age 30, defined as I said, were greatest for those who were on track the whole time, but being off track 1 or 2 periods didn't make a huge amount of difference. You drop from 81% down to 75 to 80%. You can be off track and get back on track as a young adult. That's the message that we have. 60% of young people who were off track from early childhood through adolescence still achieve middle class success. They were off track for 15 years and they still get on track. We can do this. The only time where we really got low was young people who were off track the entire time. Only a quarter of them were able to make it into the middle class by 30. And being off track in adolescence. The later you're off track, if you don't get back on track, the worse it is. So again, when we think about the core, when we think about the core experiences, and we think about your target population, this is an incredible, incredible opportunity to have young people come back. So that was a lot of data. Let's talk a little bit about why it should matter to you all. It matters because you have an opportunity to make the invisible more visible. When I look at the data about the core and your success metrics, you've got very exact metrics about conservation and recreation outcomes. You've got very exact metrics about your community outcomes, the number of volunteer service hours generated, disasters responded to, et cetera. But your outcomes for your core members are certificates and diplomas. And what I heard from Charity was an incredible array of competencies that she developed through the core network that aren't on this list. And so if we go back to that double arrow of young people supporting communities and communities supporting young people, you're losing half of your data if you don't have systematic ways to talk about the full extent to which you are supporting young people in their growth and development in ways that really benefit them from the core, but benefit them throughout their lives. So I would just ask you and give you some food for thought. Half of your core members got certificates or work towards credentials, but how many more built assets that would help them in other life areas that'll have a lasting effect and change their trajectories? How many have the language to explain that growth? Charity was incredibly articulate in explaining the skills and competencies that she built. But do all your core members have that same articulation ability? Are you working with them to really help them understand and analyze where all their points of growth are? And how much more effective could you be and more if you were more intentional about developing these skills and competencies and assessing where young people are before they come in and then measuring that growth afterwards? Think of how much impact studies you could do if you really were tracking both the youth development side as well as the community support side. So with that, I will leave you with the idea that the core network really can be a major contributor to moving that needle from 4 in 10 to 7 in 10. If you do a better job of not doing your programming, but analyzing and talking about the impact that your programming has on young people's lives in a fuller way. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions and then we'll open it up to some questions from the audience. So let's begin by returning for a moment to what positive youth development means. As you shared, positive youth development sees youth as full of potential rather than overwhelmed by problems that need to be solved. When programs like Service and Conservation Corps rise to focus on those that are hardest to serve, facing a variety of seemingly insurmountable barriers, what is your advice to leaders to maintain the integrity of positive youth development in their programs?
Yeah, the simple message there is to really, really resist the temptation to think that you have to fix before you develop, because that's not how development works. You don't fix the problems first and then engage kids in developing them. You start with their strengths. And the more you motivate people to use their strengths, the more they will on their own identify their gaps and want to fill them.
As you noted, cores have a very clear expected outcomes for our projects. We know what it will take to build a trail, for example. We know what it will take, and we know how to measure success. Helping core members build assets and the benefits of that asset building may feel less tangible. In your experience, what are some of the promising or best practices for organizations like cores to be able to measure their success in positive youth development?
I think especially because of the age group that you're working with, you can just directly engage young people in a conversation about what are the skills and competencies they are trying to build. The language is there. And the more you talk about it, the more you have a common language for it, the more you can say, well, where are you now and where do you want to go? The more you'll be able to track that progress. So there are lots of tools out there to use. The one I like is the XQ Institute's student progress framework, which really just talks about 5 big goals for young people, not academic goals, but big goals that include academics, because we don't want to exclude them. But that really acknowledge the fact that young people have to grow to be leaders, and people have to grow to have foundational knowledge. They have to have fundamental literacy, but it doesn't stop there. So they have an integrated way of talking about this. And they have competency scales that go from basic to master across all these areas. So the more you can give young people tools to really assess themselves, to say, where am I and where do I want to go, the more you're both providing data for young people and data for your programs.
Okay, thank you.
It's called the Student Performance Framework from the XQ Institute. XQ is in multiple IQs.
I was particularly intrigued by the data that showed that there was not a significant difference by the role that asset building plays for young adults across racial and ethnic groups. What impact do you believe this can have as organizations work more intentionally to increase the diversity of their programs and address issues of equality? Or equity, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a huge point, and it's one that we really need to grapple with, because the perception is so strong that young people of color, low-income young people, and people with different disabilities don't have the same assets, and that you have to start at a lower point with them. And there's a distinction between assets and behaviors. So in psychology, there's something called a COM-B model that says competencies times opportunities times motivation equals behavior. That when you look at someone's behavior, your behavior is a combination of what skills you have, what motivation you have to use those skills, and what opportunity you see to use the skills. And so what we're really looking at are opportunity gaps, not asset gaps. Young people can always build assets. If we ask them what assets they want to build, they're always on a growth path. But whether they're using their assets, whether they see the opportunities that we're presenting as true opportunities to motivate them to use their assets, is a different question. And this was shown in the Search Institute did their 40 asset survey, and my colleague at Knowledge to Power Catalyst, Catherine Plog Martinez, was actually one of the trainers for the Search Institute. And she took the data from that community into a school and said, this shows that kids in Denver have 19 assets. They're pretty much on average with the country. And one of the teachers said, there's no way my kids have 19 assets. There's just no way. That data's wrong. There's no way my kids have 19 assets. They don't show them in my class. And then they sat down to talk about, well, they don't show them in your class, but that doesn't mean you don't have them. And they talked about, well, he's not turning in his homework, but maybe he's taking care of his baby sister. Maybe that's how he's being responsible. And slowly but surely, people recognize the difference between assets and behavior. But that's the starting point. We have to understand that just because someone isn't showing you something doesn't mean they don't have the assets, they don't have the skills. It could be that they don't perceive the opportunity the same way that you perceive it, or it could be that they're just not motivated. And not motivated can mean not feeling you belong, not feeling safe, not feeling trusted.
Young adults are dealing with so much, and it has been compounded by the pandemic. At the same time, we can't ignore the reality that trusted adults in their lives are also in the same boat. I want every core director or core leader to leave here today feeling inspired and resolved, knowing that we can do the hard things. What can we do as leaders to increase our own resilience and as a result, be even greater role models and resources for the young people we serve?
Understand the importance of relationships. They're important for everybody. They're important for young people. They're important for adults. They're important for the quality of the experience. It's essential. The more we feel known and trusted and engaged, the better off everybody will be. And so just resist the temptation to fix the problem and lead with knowing the young people and knowing yourself.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to take some, or we'd like to take some questions from the audience. If you want to. Do we have? Okay.
Karen, what do you think the impact of new communications, less face-to-face and more virtual and texting and everything else, does that bring any change to your basic premise about how to measure accomplishment and how to look at the success ahead?
Well, technology has had two impacts on measuring accomplishments. One, it's basically challenged the idea that you have to do a lot of memorization because the facts are on your phone. And so the fact that we've got young people still memorizing history dates and memorizing all kinds of things that they can just look up is silly. And now you're seeing that with AI that, I can have my paper auto-corrected so I don't have to spell. Technology is going to enable us to be better thinkers if we use it well. To speak to your other point about technology and the isolation that comes from sort of being online rather than in person, that's a real reality that we saw the impact of that. And everybody saw the impact of that during COVID. There's only so much you can do on a screen or on a phone. And the fact is that you lose the ability to read people and to really develop those social skills that you only get through interaction if you don't see people in person.
Oh, question over here. Oh, you want to go there and then?
Sure. Hi, thank you. CORES hire staff from a wide variety of backgrounds for all our training tracks, and they don't always have a youth development or education background. Do you have any advice around training and even fast training for like seasonal staff on some of these concepts when we're trying to onboard staff who don't have that kind of background?
Absolutely. First of all, a youth development background and education background aren't the same. A youth development background is a universal background. I appreciate the approach of this asset-based approach. You can get that very quickly in a lot of ways. At the Forum for Youth Investment, we set up something called the Weicker Center for Youth Program Quality. It's still there. I'm not there anymore, but the Weicker Center is still there. And the Weicker Center has youth program quality assessments and trainings that you can look at. They're easy doses. They don't require a college degree, but they are broken down into very accessible pieces that show you how to develop the experiences that we're talking about. And there are other ones out there as well. But the second thing is it's really, really important to keep the diversity of people that you have coming in to the core. Because if you're acknowledging if you're really taking the time to get to know them and for them to get to know the kids, the young people, the one thing that happens is we all understand the depth and richness of our experiences. And so there's a value, whether you're talking about classroom teachers or whatever, there's a value to not just hiring a diverse set of people, but really giving them the opportunity to talk about where they are from, what skills and competencies they have, what they're working on. That's a way to really sort of build this thing that do that double arrow so that we're building it together.
I think really what I'd add to it though is just. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I was looking at you. Hi there. It's, you know, our partners cultivating partnerships for the Corps often involves kind of trying to bring people on board as partners that may want the labor component of our service, but not our, you know, youth and important of youth development. So I'm pleased to, you know, be a part of listening to the Search Institute, but when you have to tell youth development to maybe a DPW worker or a land use manager who just wants to get something done, I think those, you know, trying to kind of introduce these topics to them have been difficult and hard to cultivate that aspect of the relationship. I'm wondering if that's kind of common to what the original question was, but that was my question. Does that make sense? You know, like, does that question make sense to you? Like,
Yeah.
you know, is it?
Yeah, we have to do it in small doses. And so I would say two answers. One, the more your core staff are developing the confidence that they're not experts, but that they know the multiple ways to get the conversation started, the more they'll be able to map the conversation onto what the folks that you're partnering with want. It's absolutely true that people want the labor. That's why they're looking at it. It's also true when you're looking at folks who are in the business as experts. They're conservation experts. They're outdoor experts. They're environmental experts. They need the youth development training as well. So we need it from both sides. But the easiest way, the easiest example that I'll give you of why thinking about this helps is there's something called the Opportunity Youth Network. And Opportunity Youth are young people who are out of school and out of work and don't have a college degree. And that's been around for about 10 years now. And when it started, they brought corporations together, and corporations were committing to Opportunity Youth, to hire Opportunity Youth, sort of from a corporate social responsibility perspective. They're saying, sure, we'll hire these kids. 5 years later, they were making Opportunity Youth their preferred clients. They preferred to recruit them because of the life experience they had. So there really are ways to think about how the more we can help young people articulate what the competencies are that they have learned, even if they're not traditional ones, the more we're able to tap that into what employers and partners want.
Thank you. I know you you discussed that it's often, I think the Denver example, that the educators didn't necessarily see the assets in the young people that they were working with. And then I think another part you said that we have to work with young people to help them develop the language to articulate what they've developed in the course of their core experience or any other experience. Have you found, or has the research proven that young people are adept at describing their assets to begin with? And in what ways would cores benefit from knowing how to help a young person do an inventory of their own assets before they begin?
Yep, I'll give you another example because that's two answers to that quickly. One is they don't always know the language or the best language, but the second is even if they know they have an asset, they don't know it's important. So an example of this is there was an after-school program in Chicago, still is, called the After School Network, that has high school students working with people in the community who are in their professions to give them real sort of job experience, working with artists and directors and things. And this program is very successful. People love it. And they had it evaluated. And they were stunned when the evaluation came back not as positive as they wanted. The evaluator said, well, how do we evaluate this? We think that these young people this experience is making them more employable, but they're not employed yet. So what he did was to say, let's get some real HR people in from the community who are business leaders. Let's have them talk about what they were looking for in a basic entry-level job for a high school student. And then let's have them interview these students who have had these incredible work experiences. They've had these incredible internships and apprenticeship experiences. That's what he did. When they were interviewed, they found that really only like 40% of the kids would have hit the level 4 or 5. I would hire this person if I had a job, or this kid was so amazing I'd make a job for them. They were dismayed by that number. That wasn't a great number to have after this investment in apprenticeship experiences. So they went to the HR people and said, why these low scores? And they said, well, we were asking young people questions like, give me an example of when you had to resolve a conflict, or give me an example of what you would do in a leadership setting, or give me an example of when, and the young people weren't able to do it. I said, well, that's not hard. We know that they had those skills. So they went back to the classes. They had young people sit around a table, 6 one-hour sessions, and talk about, and have them talk about an example when they did that thing. When did you have an opportunity to experience leadership? When did you have an opportunity to resolve a conflict, and how did you do it? They then had the students re-interviewed by a different set of people, same forum, different people, and the number doubled. They didn't build any competencies. All they did was learn to talk about them. And that's the kind of thing that you can do in your programs.
All right, and any last questions? Oh. I believe it is, yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting the thumbs up from the tech team, yes.
How about your slides, Karen? Can those be?
You can have them. Yep, you can have them, absolutely.
Laura?
I'll just project.
Okay, sorry. I liked how you pointed out the data that the core network typically collects. As a board member, do you have ideas about how, as a movement, we can increase that kind of data? We always talk about it at our core of trying to like put our secret sauce, into the metrics. It's really hard. We've explored with resiliency measures and protective factors, but any recommendations for the core of how we can round out that data to tell our story a little better about the changes that we hope young people make in their lives?
Yes, but being on the job one day as a board member, I want to reserve my options. But there are so many ways to do it. But I want to really sit with you and think about a way that works for you all. But absolutely, we can add into those measures something that's meaningful
Okay.
and easy to capture. Yes.
We have I think we have a new assignment for our data management team.
Yeah, just a follow-up, one comment. I can say that we actually created like a pre-mid and post survey for our members that we've been doing with the help of a fellow from University of Houston. And we're actually using their feedback to change the questions as well. But I mean, it's a Google form we invented. So my question, the comment I should say, is that actually we're just reviewing it for the last couple of times we've put it out. And multiple of our members have said they want more professional development and communication. So just echoing what you said, they're asking for it, which is what I love. But I would love it if you have even a list of more robust tools that we don't have to create in-house.
Yes,
We're
you
using
shouldn't
it
create
for
them
now.
in-house. There are many of them out there, and I promise to work with you to find the ones that meet your needs best. But there are many of them out there.
Yeah, awesome. If there's like a list you could share even to get started while we work on it, that would be awesome, because I
Okay.
want to start with something until we have something
Good.
uniform.
Will do.
Thank you.
Oh, got one.
Thanks so much for being here today. I was looking at the slide when you did on track, off track. I couldn't see that far away, so I took a picture and I'm zooming in. And it says for adolescents 11 to 19, on track is graduating high school with a GPA, not being convicted of a crime, nor becoming a parent. And then for 19 to 29, it says lives independently and receives a college degree and has a family income of greater than 250% of the poverty level. So as I think about skills, motivation, and opportunity, I think that absolutely addresses the nexus of what we're trying to do, increase skills, create an environment for motivation and connection to opportunity. But I wonder, as we're thinking about this data question, if 300% of the poverty level is the objective, and it's not just attachment to a job or attachment to education, but it's that longer term outcome, your thoughts around the actual on-track metrics that we should be measuring for the age group that we're working with to achieve that longer term goal?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to come at the on track, off track than the way that Brookings did. They were really using available data out of a huge data set. And there's the studies are so much more detailed. For anybody that really is a research wonk, you can actually get permission to use that data. You can go in and do your own analyses of it. But I think the main thing that you're going to need to do is know your starting point, know where your core members are, and where they want to go, and where in general we think youth success is. But the idea that by age 30 you should be reasonably economically self-sufficient, you should be healthy in terms of both physical health, emotional health, relationships, you should be connected to something. That Gambone data, that Gambone definition gives you more leeway for young people to define success in a way that's meaningful for them, but also allows you to have data and data points to show your progress as a network.
I think we have time for one more question. All right. Well, I think you have covered the topic sufficiently, or at least given us enough to think about that that we have to digest a little bit. But I get the sense that you're going to be a popular board member, and thank you. The Core Network really is very blessed to have an amazingly talented, experienced group of board members, and we keep adding to that group all the time. So I hope you will go on our website. Karen has obviously expertise in youth development, which I think will be helpful to many of you. We have land managers, conservationists, workforce development specialists, service. So really just an amazingly talented, knowledgeable, experienced, and very passionate group of people. You would be surprised to be in a room with them and hear how passionate they are about helping you all do what you do better. So just very briefly in terms of closing, a little recap of the past few days. They've been a whirlwind for me. I don't know about for you all, but it seems like quite a while ago that we were choosing Oreo cookies by color. Seems like a long time ago, but our opening plenary kicked us off with a lot of energy, Oreos, and encouraged us to innovate and think outside the box. Our second plenary, we were joined by our longtime friend and supporter, Julie Rodriguez, and learned about how the White House is still thinking about civilian climate corps. And we heard from Mayor Liccardo and San Jose about how they have formed a partnership to implement and expand their own version of a CCC in their community. Then on Tuesday night, we had an amazing Legacy Awards reception. It was great to see Harry Brule, who has contributed so much to this movement, and then he has stepped away for a bit. So great to see him again. And then how fun was it to celebrate with Debbie and Marie and their families? Nights like Tuesday night remind us how much time and commitment people put into the core movement, and how much knowledge and experience is among us all the time. Yesterday, we heard from a panel of former Corps members about how the Corps experience enabled them to develop leadership skills and become change makers in their own way. And then what an amazing and thought-provoking conversation with Jossie Ross, Dr. Gilda Shepard, and Kamanti Carter. I would really encourage you to watch the entirety of Kamanti's story as told in the documentary When I Was Down, available on Netflix. It's very, very inspiring and thought-provoking. Last night, we had an opportunity to honor our 2023 Corps members, projects, and partners of the year. And it was great to be joined by DOI Secretary Deb Holland and NPS Director Chuck Sams. I think I've heard back from both of their staff that they had a good time hanging out with us last night. So maybe they will come back. And then earlier this afternoon, we heard from a number of our federal partners about really some incredible opportunities presented in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Just recalling what I took away from some of the panels, it sounds like the Department of Interior is planning to spend an additional $64 million in partnership with Corps during the remainder of 2023 alone. That's not a long time, and that is a fair amount of money, so we're going to have to help them get that out the door. Similarly, the U.S. Forest Service has set aside as much as $60 million for wildfire management in partnership with Corps. EPA is looking for community-based partners to spend nearly $3 billion in environmental justice communities over the next 3 years, and they are looking for community-based partners to help them do it. And I don't know about you, but I think Corps are perfect candidates for that. So we'll continue to follow up on those conversations here in DC. I see Danielle nodding her head. I think she's been making notes to herself about all the people we have to call and get meetings with, but we're going to continue to push to make sure that that those monies get spent in a way that is not only getting incredible work done in communities that need it, but also in ways that build the assets of the young people in the communities and develop the economies of those communities for the long term. While we were sitting here this afternoon, the president's FY24 budget request was released. And I've heard from our government relations staff that it includes a request for $20 million for the Civilian Climate Corps at AmeriCorps. And we heard Sandy talk about the statutory changes to make the education award non-taxable and make it possible for young people with criminal backgrounds and for dreamers to serve, which are really important changes. And one thing that we did read but didn't hear about was the president has requested $20 million for a CCC program at the Department of Labor. So we had a question about where is the workforce piece going to be addressed, and I think that's a good start. So we have a lot of work to do. The administration is obviously committed to continuing a fight for a CCC, but we need to help. We need to help them make it a reality. So we're all going to go back and get to work. And then, of course, we just heard from our new board member, Karen Pittman, about how the Corps experience can be even more impactful for the young people that you serve. And it's needed much more than ever. We heard from a number of folks in the mental health care field over the past couple of days about what a crisis we're in. So learning from people like Karen about how Corps can help young people get back on track is really important. In between amazing plenaries, we heard best practices and innovation, new opportunities from experts and from each other, and we're reminded why we do what we do every day by our amazing Corps members of the year. Let's give them one more round of applause. And I reiterate what I said last night. I think any one of them could be a future Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Education, President. We have an amazing group of young people that come through your doors every day. I thought this was an exceptional program from start to finish. There was a whole lot of energy, and I think a lot of that has to do with being back together again, and feeling empowered by the moments around us. So let's keep that going. And I'd like to take a moment to thank the Core Network's outstanding staff for pulling all this together. So I'm really excited about taking all that we've done here together over the last few days, the opportunities we've learned about, the great financial opportunities and the unprecedented opportunities and the historic moment before us. We heard Matthew Tejada talk about, describe sort of the current moment as, I forget, he said it so eloquently, an opportunity to put a stamp, or maybe that was George McDonald, but to really make take these opportunities to make the United States look different and to use these resources to make it into the country that it has the potential to be and that we want it to be. So I'm excited to move forward with all of this. And I'm already thinking about how fun it's going to be next year to be here with you together telling success stories about all that we accomplished and all the successes we had. So now we will be getting to work. Not Monday. We're all going to have Core Network staff all has the day off on Monday. But Tuesday, we're all going to get to work on making all of these incredible opportunities a reality. So thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to Marie to give a few last closing remarks. But thank you so much for being with us, and it's great to be back with you again, and I'm already looking forward to next year.
Mary Ellen, we want to thank you for your vision and for all that you have done for all of us. We thank you and we love you. Thank you, Mary Ellen. I think we can do just a little bit better than that. If nobody else's staff in this room needs to thank this lady for what she has done. Yes. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Just a couple of reminders before we go, that you should be receiving a notice to do our survey. There's a conference survey that's attached to the attendee hub, and there is a prize, right? I think there's a prize if you submit by the 17th of March. It's a competition though. It's not everybody that completes it gets a $50 Visa gift card. But it's the first person to complete. Okay, you're going to be picked at random. Okay. No, Bruce is retired, so we don't have to worry about that. But submit your conference survey by the 17th, and at random, there's a pick for a winner who completes it, and there will be a $50 gift card. And this is also for the virtual people watching. So all you out in TV land, don't forget, you're part of this just as much as those of us sitting here in the room. All of our plenary sessions are uploaded onto the attendee hub, including the one that we had this little glitch earlier this afternoon, but they'll be available on the attendee hub through June the 7th. But then if you want to go back and rewatch some of our plenary sessions after June the 7th, go to the Core Network's YouTube channel. Yep, the Core Network has a YouTube channel. So go to the YouTube channel and watch on the YouTube channel. Also want to remind you that if you will be in the DC area on June the 16th, we will be having our annual day of service. So please check the crew leader that comes out for our day of service location. And last but not least, mark your calendars to join us right back here in Washington, D.C., March 19th through the 21st for our 2024 conference. And for those of you who have been joining us live, we thank you for joining us, and we will see all of you back here next year in March. God bless. Safe travels home.